want to talk to you a little bit about how, as an American, how I feel about the election of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I'll move this plate away.
Do you expect Donald Trump winning?
No, I was completely surprised because I listened to the news and all the news reports were saying Hillary's ahead, Hillary's ahead. Trump has very little chance. Hillary has a 90% chance of winning. And at the last minute, during the last month of the campaign, they had this earlier, but they waited until October. They found a video in which he was talking dirty.
Compromise to women.
Yeah, and it was 11 years ago.
Who he was talking about?
He was talking to somebody else who was involved with a TV show that he was on. I never heard the video, I just heard. So who wants to hear that stuff? You know, the stuff he was saying, basically talking about women in a sexual way. Now, nobody thinks that's good. But he apologized for it. And it was 11 years ago. It was stupid, it was immature, it was the kind of talk that maybe you hear from teenagers. But I was not willing to, because of that, not support Donald Trump and support Hillary instead, because what Hillary was doing was far worse than that stupid talk. What Hillary had done...
Betrayal, actually.
Yeah, Hillary, she was making deals where if people like the King of Morocco would make a donation of a couple of $1 million to the Clinton Foundation, which basically is supposed to be a charity, but the Clintons were getting a lot of that money, one way or another. Then she would give influence to these foreign leaders because she was the Secretary of State. She would give them access to the president or whatever advantages that they could be given as foreign leaders. And she knew that this is illegal, this is a conflict of interest, so she didn't want it on the government computer because then it would be under surveillance. Everybody could see it. So she was using her own personal server, and she never thought that information about the personal server would come out until the hearings over the attack at Benghazi embassy. The people conducting the hearing said, well, we want to see the emails regarding that terrorist attack at Benghazi where the ambassador and his guards were killed, and what was done to provide security, when did you know about the attack, what was the response, and she didn't have emails available on the government email collection, and it somehow came out that she had been using a personal server. Now, the problem with the personal server is that it doesn't have the security of the government email system, and foreign governments were able to see exactly what the Secretary of State, that's a very important position in the government, was talking about when she was communicating with other high officials of the government. And so we don't know this for sure, but probably the Chinese, probably the Russians, because they're very sophisticated in cyber warfare. Maybe the Iranians. They would know in advance if the United States planned to take an action that would be maybe against what the Russians were doing. The Russians would know in advance because they were getting the private correspondence. And there was at least one drone strike that was talked about in those emails. And if the enemy, which in this case was ISIS, was able to get information, probably the Iranians or another group that would have that capacity could pass it to a terrorist group, then whoever the target of that drone strike was would know, I better not stay there anymore. So national security was compromised. So yeah, Donald Trump was stupid, and that talking dirty was inappropriate and hard to accept, but it was not as bad as endangering the national security. So, like many Americans, I didn't vote for Trump.
Can I get
Sure.
Don't let me.
What are we reaching for?
can I get a bag of tea? Green tea?
Что надо tea?
Oh, the tea.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
She got a hot water here. So.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Yeah, I have more tea for you in your package here.
Thank you.
Here's a box of tea.
And this was a personal personality of this errand.
Yeah, it was a personality against the issues, and so I voted against Hillary, not for Trump. He wasn't my first choice, but Hillary Clinton had betrayed the United States, and also her policies. I think that we do need to control who comes in the United States, and we need to have secure borders. Maybe not a wall, but secure borders. Hillary Clinton went for open borders. I think that Muslims there's nothing wrong with Muslims. We have Muslims that live in the United States and they're good people. But Muslims that come from Syria or Somalia or places where there are terrorists cannot come to the United States in large numbers until we find a way to find out who they are associated with. Because that is exactly how we can bring terrorists into the United States. And this happened in France, this happened in Belgium, that some of the people involved in terrorist attacks there came in as refugees, and they were affiliated with ISIS, and then they get hold of a gun, and they go to a nightclub, and they shoot dozens of people. We don't need that here. So Hillary said during her first year she wanted to let in 65,000 Muslim refugees from Syria, and Donald Trump said, I'm not going to do this until we find a way to, the word is vet them, means check them out, to make sure they're not affiliated with terrorists. Now, you can't do a background check because the Syrian government is in chaos and they don't have records on everybody. But I think that there may be sophisticated ways to interview these people and find out what their beliefs are, if they're willing to.
Truth detector at least.
Yeah, a lie detector is a good idea. Are they willing to assimilate into the United States, or do they carry terrorist ideas, and are they going to be looking for an opportunity to become jihadists? And so, for the security of the United States, I think Trump was a better choice.
Is this his personal desire, or this political party, or Republican Party?
Well, he's a Republican, but a lot of the Republicans don't like him because he's an outsider. He's not part of the club, which the Bushes were part of the club. Romney was part of the club. These were Republicans, lifelong Republicans. They all knew each other, and Trump came completely from the outside, had never been elected to anything before. He was a businessman. So a lot of the Republicans didn't like him and still don't like him. But what we needed was an outsider, because the government forgot that it was supposed to be the government of the people. American people didn't like the things Obama was doing. They didn't like Obamacare. They didn't like the deal with Iran, which is another problem that I can talk about later. So they elected a Republican Congress. So Republicans control Congress, but Obama continues to do anything he wants because the Republicans do not oppose him. They just give in to him. So many of the people who voted for the Republican Congress felt betrayed, and they thought, well, the next presidential election comes. We don't want a so-called establishment Republican. We want an outsider who's not part of politics, who's not part of the Washington scene, who's in touch with the people and will give the people what they want. And so Trump, even though he's a billionaire, and you can't really say that he's lived the kind of life that we've lived, he's always lived a life of privilege, yet he didn't live only in Washington. And in the business that he was in, constructing hotels and golf courses, he would go to the construction sites. He would talk to the workers. He would be what's called a hands-on manager. He wanted to see everything that was going on. And so he was in touch with the people, even though he was above them. But also what I respect about him is that he did not need the job. Donald Trump had everything anybody could want.
Yeah, we can work on a,
Yeah, he had all the money.
on a common goal, common.
Yeah, I mean, he had a beautiful wife. He could never spend all the money he has. He's famous already. He had been a television star. Everybody in the world knows his name. Buildings are named after him. So he wasn't looking for fame. He wasn't looking for wealth. He just believed the country was going in a wrong direction, and so he was going to use his position to run for president to try, as he said, to make America great again. And he said a lot of stupid things during the campaign.
In economic way, great again, or in a spiritual way, religious and.
Well, actually both. Now, even though he's not a perfect person, and his comments in the past about women are not what we'd expect from a Christian, he has lately, and people change, he's 70 years old now, he has lately become more of a spiritual person. He's met with pastors, church leaders, both black and white, and he's taken a position against abortion. Hillary Clinton is in favor of abortion anytime to anybody who wants it. Trump, the Supreme Court will decide on abortion, not the President of the United States, but Trump will appoint judges who do not think abortion is a right. Judges who think abortion is basically taking a life. And that's all the Christian churches, Protestant, Catholic, even Mormon, all of them believe abortion is taking a life. There may be certain circumstances where it's justified, but abortion is not a form of birth control. You know, if you have sex and your partner gets pregnant, the solution should not be, all right, I didn't want this pregnancy, so I'll go get an abortion. And the solution should be, if you're going to have sex and you don't want a pregnancy to occur, there are many birth control products on the market. It's not necessary for anybody to become pregnant if they don't want to, except with a rape, and that's a different story. And maybe abortion may be justified, but most of the abortions, and I believe the number is like 50,000 a year, maybe more, most of the abortions that are occurring in America are not abortions on women who were raped. They're abortions on women who choose not to have the baby. So that's a religious position. And
they prove that this baby in 3 months, they don't have a mind yet. But if we go this way, we can consider that person who have a mental disease, they don't have a mind, they don't have a clear mind. All this crazy people, you know.
There are certain circumstances where somebody can't
too.
raise a baby, but of course a lot of babies that are being aborted could be put in foster care. And there are people who want a baby and they cannot have babies, and so they're willing to adopt. Now, my favorite singer is Andrea Bocelli, an Italian singer. He's blind. And he talks about abortion because when his mother became pregnant, the doctors said that there was a birth defect, the baby is going to be born blind, and so we recommend that you have an abortion. And the mother said, no, I will have my baby anyway. And so she gave birth to him. And yes, he's blind, but he's probably the most famous singer in the world today.
Other senses increase.
So this is, I think the president is in a position to set the tone. For example, what's going on right now, since the election of Trump, many people are angry that Trump won, and they're going in the street and they're blocking traffic and they're damaging cars. There was a situation in Philadelphia. I saw a video of it. It made me sick. A person was pulled out of his car and he was beaten up and kicked because somebody said he's a Trump supporter. So he was just beaten up for that. Nobody even knows if he was a Trump supporter. I bet he's a Trump supporter now. But this kind of behavior is not the way Americans are supposed to respond if they don't get the election result they want. Now, Obama, as the President of the United States, should say, we need to accept the election result. The candidate we wanted didn't win because we'll be president for 4 years. Then there's an opportunity for us to win. But meanwhile, we need to obey the laws and we need to go back to work. But Obama has not said that. In fact, he's said the opposite. He said that the protests are good. So this is not the leadership that we need. Now, Trump hasn't said anything publicly about the protests because he's not yet the president. But we need somebody who's going to say wrong is wrong and right is right.
Yeah.
Now, when we have situations like police shooting black people, I mean, a couple of incidents. Now, when this happened in Ferguson, Missouri, and in other cities, the black community rioted. They burned stores and businesses. They looted. They went into these businesses and stole things. Some people were hurt. In Dallas, Texas, somebody killed five police officers. This was the reaction to situations where a white policeman, and sometimes it wasn't even a white policeman, it was just a policeman, shot a black man. Now, what the President of the United States should have said is, we need to be calm, we need to wait and see what the facts are, but there is no value in going out and destroying the neighborhood or shooting at cops because of this incident. In some cases, after there was a trial, in fact, in most of the cases, it was shown that the police were justified in shooting the person. In one case in South Carolina, and there's another case now in Minnesota, it was shown that the police are wrong. The person in South Carolina is in jail now. His trial is this week. I think he's going to get a life sentence. He shot a black man. He stopped the black man ran away, and he shot him in the back.
Wow.
And then in Minnesota, there was a police officer in a similar situation. She shot a man while he was running away. That's not a justification. So she's going to have to pay consequences. So these are two incidents where the police were wrong and the police will be punished. Other situations, when there was a trial, it was shown the police were justified. I don't remember his name. There was this case where a friend of the person shot said, I think his last name was Brown. Oh, he had his hands up and said, "Don't shoot," and he was shot. But when the case went to trial, witnesses from that community said, "No, that's a lie. He didn't have his hands up. He was running towards the cop." This was a very big man. I think he was 250 pounds or something. He had already tried to take the gun from the policeman, and then he was charging him like a football player when he was shot. And so the police officer was exonerated, was found not guilty of any charges. But the lie still continues that he had his hands up when he was shot. And people who want to agitate, who want to create racial division, they keep repeating this lie. There's people like Al Sharpton. And Obama has not stood up and said, this is wrong, these riots are wrong, the communities need to stay peaceful, let justice take its course. If that was a wrongful shooting, the police officer will suffer the consequences. But this rioting is wrong. Obama has not shown that kind of leadership.
Do you need a food?
Yeah, I want to get some dessert. Can you pause that while I get something to eat?
Yeah,
So you don't film?
used to have in the Soviet Union. So the
There was a boxing match last night, and a Russian fighter against an American fighter. Sergei Kovalev is his name. He lost, but I think that he should have won. It was
was it boxing or mixed fight?
no regular boxing, a light heavyweight
okay.
championship. I'll show you his picture later. But there'll probably be a rematch, so he'll get an opportunity to make more money. The fighter who he beat during the second round, he had him on the ground. He knocked him down. But yet they gave the decision to the other fighter. A very close decision. Sometimes it goes that way in boxing.
Yeah.
So he was very disappointed.
Не дай.
Скажи, что хочет делать, и вот обсудим. Тоже игра.
So, what you saying about Congress?
Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was one of the reasons that Trump got elected. The Supreme Court is supposed to decide on whether or not a law complies with the Constitution. And that gives the Supreme Court a lot of power. Now, one of the judges on the Supreme Court had died during the past year, Justice Scalia. He was very conservative. Conservative means he would follow the Constitution closely. And if something was not in the Constitution, it meant that the federal government didn't have the right to do it. But he died, and so there was a vacancy. And the court was divided between the liberals and the conservatives, but because he died, the next president would choose who the judge would be, and if the judge is going to be a liberal, that would change the direction of the court. Now, an example of a liberal decision would be gay marriage. Marriage used to be decided by the states. When you apply for a marriage license, you don't go to the federal government. You go to an office of the state you're in, and you apply for the marriage license, and all the states had rules about marriage, and the rules are pretty simple. You had to be a certain age. I think it's all the same in all the states. I think over 18. And you had to be a man or a woman.
You have to be clear-minded,
And
mental healthy.
yeah, exactly. There may be some regulations about whether or not you're a criminal, although I've seen cases of people who are in jail, they get married while they're in jail. It varies from state to state. It's a state decision. Now, the controversy came up a couple of years ago about gay marriage, and they did polls in all the states, and in every state, I think as high as 90% of the people said, we don't mind if gay people want to live together, that's their business. But marriage should be between a man and a woman, as it's always been. So gay organizations, which have a lot of power, they said this is discrimination. That if I want to marry my boyfriend, I can marry my boyfriend if I'm a man, or if I'm a woman, I can marry my girlfriend, and that should be a legal marriage. It should have nothing to do with gender. So that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court made the decision that marriage can be between two men or two women, or a man and a woman, and this went against the majority of the people, and it took the right away from the states to make a decision about marriage. If, for example, a liberal state like California wanted to allow gay marriage, then people could go to California, gay people, and they could get married over there. But by the Supreme Court making this decision, then that meant that throughout the United States, gay marriage is now accepted. Now, here's how it interfered with people's rights. There was a case where a gay couple, two men, wanted to get married, and they went to a bakery, and they said, "We'd like a wedding cake for our marriage." And have you seen these wedding cakes? They have a little statue of the bride and the groom, and this cake would probably have a little statue of two grooms, two men standing
It
together.
was in Washington or Oregon, I think.
Yeah, somewhere out west. And the baker, who was a Christian, said, I respect,
Your relationship.
your relationship, but it's against my religion to
Become discrimination.
to accept a marriage, and so I don't want to participate by making a wedding cake. Now, of course, they could have gone somewhere else and got the cake made, but they decided to make it a legal issue. So they sued the baker for discrimination, and they won because the Supreme Court had said marriage between two men is now legal, and so on that basis, they were able to say that this baker denied us our wedding cake, discriminated against us, and so the baker had to pay, I think, $100,000 in fines and legal costs, and went out of business. And
Actually, she was discriminated.
she was discriminated against, so she couldn't fight this. And so what the Supreme Court should do is look at the Constitution, and the Constitution said certain powers go to the federal government and other powers are state powers. Marriage was always something that was controlled by the states. What the Supreme Court did is they disregarded the Constitution and they made it a federal issue, and so they decided on the federal issue that they were going to make gay marriage legal. So a conservative judge is going to say, if it's not in the Constitution, we don't have the right to do it. Now, the Second Amendment is a big controversy, and this is one of the things where Donald Trump got a lot of support. The Second Amendment, this is part of the Bill of Rights, is the right to bear arms. So that means that you can have a gun in your house. Especially, I think, in your situation, you travel a lot, ESL. So Victoria may remember, when I'm talking to you, or I'm talking to Victoria, especially if we're doing business, I'm going to look you in the eyes, because in American culture, this shows trust. If I can't look you in the eyes, maybe I'm trying to do a dirty deal. If I were doing business with a Muslim woman and I were looking her in the eyes, that would be, her husband would kill me.
Here?
He would kill me, because that would be intimacy. I'm not allowed to look her in the eyes. Now, a lot of Americans need to know this before they travel abroad.
Even if they look to a man's eyes, it can be interpreted as aggression.
Yeah, so these are cultural things. And Muslims coming into the United States, I've seen this on Facebook, I haven't seen it personally. You could pass a restaurant and it has a big sign that says, special on pork or ribs. And Muslims have protested, and they said, this is offensive to us because we think the pig is such a dirty animal. And I have another Russian friend, a student, and she's married to a Turkish man from Turkey, and he's open-minded. He's very much a Westerner, and she's a Christian, and she brought a Bible into the household of her husband, and her mother-in-law got very upset. It was almost as if the Bible was something bad, like pornography or something. Oh, I don't want to see that. Get that out of here. They have a completely closed mind.
And what's their religion? Muslims? Islamic?
Yeah, Turks are Muslims.
Yeah.
In fact, there's something on the internet now that in Turkey, they're going to legalize childhood weddings, which means that in some of these Muslim countries, a man can marry a 9-year-old.
Yeah, that's how it used to be. Even in Russia, 13 years old, especially among gypsies. Even now.
And we find that completely unacceptable, of course. And of course, I love animals, and in China they eat dogs and cats. Not all parts of China, but
Korea,
yeah.
Kazakhstan, everywhere. They say it's treating tuberculosis.
But whatever country somebody comes from, and they need to know, well, I don't have a lot of money. I need to buy some clothes. Where can I get some clothes without spending a lot? And so on the video I can say, you don't need to go to the mall. If you go to the mall, you spend a lot of money. You can go to a thrift shop, a Goodwill store. And you can buy used clothing. It's as good as new.
Do you know the refugee centers around here?
No, I haven't seen any refugees. They're probably somewhere.
There is a one in New York where I used to live in Utica. There's a big refugee center. There are people from Russia, Burma, Thailand, Bosnia.
And they give them advice and
There is a language school like ESL, it's called BOSIS, and they're giving them a jobs, housing, everything.
that's a good idea.
It's all volunteer based.
And we could use that here.
It depends how many refugees around here, you know better. How many people were in your class?
6 or 7. They kept the classes small.
Oh,
Now, when I was teaching college at Greenville Tech, I'd have 20 to 25 students, but that was not ESL, that was regular English. But when I was teaching at the Greenville Literacy Center, there's 6 or 7 students at a time sitting around a table.
because these people need advice. And,
people need personal advice too. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I'm just an average person, an educated person. But I have lived. And I'm twice your age, and so I've had experiences you have not. I've seen people, they are in a relationship. Somebody breaks up with them. They're devastated. They can't go on. They feel like they lost everything. And I've had students in that situation. And so I could give somebody a video, and I would preface the video by saying, I don't speak as a mental health professional. I don't speak as a psychologist or a psychiatrist or as a pastor. I'm not a priest or a minister. I just speak as a person who's lived a little bit. And this is my advice for getting over a relationship. And I'll tell them the things that I did. This is my advice for handling disappointment. This is my advice for losing weight. Now, I could tell.
yeah, your experience. You have more than these young guys who give advices how lose weight, who never gain weight, and never, be fat in their lives. So, and these new people, they need references in getting jobs, in getting in college, because nobody knows them, somebody's scared of them, especially in getting a new job. Nobody want to take a person from the street, because it's very hard to fire him. You have to pay compensations, medical expenses, and job disability, a lot of things if you get the wrong person on the job. So there is no test like in employment agencies.
When you live as long as I've lived, and I hope to live much longer, I have so much to do, you feel a need to, okay, I learned all these things. I'm not going to be able to go back and redo my life. The mistakes I made that taught me something I won't make again. But I'd like to pass some of this to another generation.
There's many people in need. They don't have advice from their parents. Some of them don't have a parents.
have so many things. Every day, I can make a list of things that I had done the day before that I wish I did differently. I can make a list of some things I did well, too. And probably the best thing to do is to look at the mistakes, but don't make the mistakes define me. All right, I made a mistake here, didn't do this right, but it doesn't mean I'm a failure. Because if you lose your confidence, you can't go on. Yeah, I think they're probably closing, and you got a baby to go home with.
Here. Let's go. Where is Mika?
Hey, Karen.
Everything's good?
Everything's excellent.
Okay.
You pay up front. You can leave a tip a little bit. Shameful everybody. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But Georgia have also have a law about
What time they close?
All right, I will see you. And happy Thanksgiving. Hi, teacher.
Oh, thank you. Вика, помогай. Давай скорее. Держи.
Sign the receipt. You need a receipt?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good night, Linda.
Ready
Này kìa.
to go?
Nha màu đen này vậy. Thank you. Good night.
Can you hold this spaghetti sauce?
Yes.
Be careful, that's glass.
Baby.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll see you soon for your
Okay,
lesson.
teacher.